Welcome, weary traveler of the modern age. You've brushed your teeth, dimmed the lights, and now seek comfort in the soothing embrace of historical misery. Tonight, we begin with the Aztecs, a civilization so advanced they had floating gardens, chocolate currency, and a calendar that made ours look like a toddler's fridge magnet. But they also had a slight obsession with human sacrifice. And by slight, we mean daily, theatrical, and often involving flutes. So tuck yourself in and let us explore why being chosen as an Aztec sacrifice victim was the spiritual equivalent of being picked last for dodgeball, except with more obsidian knives and fewer second chances. Imagine waking up one morning in Tenochtitlan, the bustling heart of the Aztec Empire. The sun is shining, the canals are glistening, and someone's playing a bone flute in the distance. You stretch, yawn, and then notice a group of priests outside your hut. They're smiling. That's never a good sign. You've been chosen, not for a promotion, not for a parade, but for a sacrifice. Now, before you panic, let's clarify. Being selected as a sacrifice victim was technically an honor, like being named Employee of the Month, except instead of a parking spot, you get your heart removed in front of thousands. The Aztecs believed this was the ultimate gift to the gods, a way to keep the sun rising, the rain falling, and the empire thriving. So really, you're doing everyone a favor, including the guy who gets to wear your skin later. Yes, we'll get to that. But how were victims chosen? It varied. Some were prisoners of war, caught during the Aztecs' very intentional flower wars. Battles designed not to win territory, but to collect future sacrifices. Like others were slaves, criminals, or volunteers, usually brainwashed or bribed. And then there were the unlucky few selected for their beauty, purity, or resemblance to a specific god. If you had great cheekbones and a symmetrical face, congratulations, you were doomed. So, you've been chosen as a sacrifice, mazel tov, in the Aztec world. This was technically an honor, like winning a spiritual lottery where the prize is a front row seat to your own demise. But before the big day, you're treated to a surprisingly lavish experience. Think of it as the ancient version of a luxury retreat, except instead of detoxing your soul, you're donating it. First up, food. You're fed like a noble. Tamales, maize cakes, spicy stews, and frothy chocolate drinks. The full sacred spread. The priests want you plump, radiant, and spiritually marinated. A well-fed victim was considered a respectful offering to the gods. It's a bit like preparing a ceremonial turkey, except you're the turkey and the oven is a pyramid with stairs. Then comes the makeover. You're dressed in elaborate costumes, often designed to mimic the god you're about to meet in person. Feathers gold jewelry, face paint, and sometimes even a headdress that doubles as a neck workout. If you're impersonating Tenochtitlan, the god of fate and night, you might be given a flute and taught to walk with divine swagger. Uri, not just a sacrifice. Uri, a temporary deity with a very short contract. In the days leading up to your death, you're paraded through the city. People cheer. Children wave. You smile like a beauty queen with a secret. Everyone knows what's coming, but they pretend it's not horrifying. It's all very theatrical, part religious ritual, part public spectacle, and part denial. You might even be given ceremonial companions like a fake wife or attendants, just to complete the illusion that this is a celebration and not a countdown. Finally, there's the pep talk, okay? The priests gather around and gently remind you that your death is essential. Without your heart, the sun might stop rising. The rain might dry up. The gods might get cranky. So really, you're doing everyone a favor. You're encouraged to be brave, serene, and ideally silent. Screaming is considered bad form. Crying, understandable, but not ideal. The perfect victim is composed, dignified, and ready to ascend, preferably without kicking anyone in the shins. So yes, you're pampered, but it's less spa day and more last meal before doom. As you lie in bed tonight, be grateful your bedtime routine doesn't involve ceremonial flutes, ominous parades, and existential pressure to keep the sun alive. Sleep tight, and may your chocolate be for comfort, not cosmic obligation. If you think your calendar is packed, birthdays, holidays, random National Avocado Day celebrations, the Aztecs would like to offer a blood-soaked rebuttal. Their sacred calendar had 18 months, each with 20 days, and nearly every one featured a festival that involved human sacrifice. It wasn't just a seasonal thing, it was a lifestyle, a rhythm, a spiritual subscription service where the gods demanded regular heart deliveries. Each month honored a different deity. Rain gods, war gods, fertility gods, even flayed skin gods. Yes, we'll get to that one later. And each deity had its own preferred sacrifice style. Some liked hearts, others wanted victims burned, shot with arrows, or forced to dance until they collapsed. It was like a divine tasting menu, and humans were the appetizers. These festivals weren't grim affairs either. They were full-blown community events. Think of them as a mix between Mardi Gras and a horror movie premiere. There was music, food, dancing, and a general sense of we're all in this together. Except that guy. People dressed up, sang hymns, and watched the ceremonies unfold with a mix of awe and mild nausea. It bonded communities, reinforced religious beliefs, and gave everyone a chance to wear feathers and pretend the screaming was symbolic. One of the most infamous festivals was dedicated to Zype Totec, the god of agriculture and renewal. His celebration involved flaying a victim, removing their skin, and having a priest wear it like a ceremonial cardigan. The idea was that shedding skin symbolized rebirth. The reality was that it smelled like a butcher's apron and made hugs extremely awkward. The Aztecs believed these rituals kept the universe in balance. Sacrifice wasn't just tradition, it was cosmic maintenance. Without it, the sun might stop rising, the rain might vanish, and the world might collapse into chaos. So they scheduled sacrifices like we schedule oil changes: regular, necessary, and slightly unpleasant. As you drift off tonight, be grateful your calendar doesn't include mandatory heart removal day or flayed skin Friday. Sleep tight, and may your holidays involve cake, not ceremonial knives. If you're going to be sacrificed, you might as well look fabulous. That was the Aztec philosophy anyway. Victims weren't tossed onto pyramids in their everyday tunics. Oh no. They were dressed in elaborate, symbolic costumes that ranged from majestic to mildly humiliating. It was part theater, part theology, and part what not to wear. Divine edition, depending on which god you were being offered to. Your outfit could include feathers, gold, shells, jaguar pelts, or, in one particularly unfortunate case, someone else's skin. Yes, if you were impersonating Zype Totec, the god of renewal, you might be flayed and then have your skin ceremonially worn by a priest. It was also considered deeply uncomfortable, especially in the summer. Some victims were dressed as warriors, complete with shields and headdresses to honor gods of war. Others were adorned with flowers and painted in bright colors to represent fertility or spring. The goal was to make you resemble the deity you were about to meet, like divine cosplay, but with a tragic ending. If you had symmetrical features and a good jawline, you might be chosen to impersonate Tenochtitlan, the god of fate. You'd be pampered for a year, taught to play the flute, and then ceremonially executed. It was the Aztec version of being a celebrity with a very strict expiration date. The costumes weren't just symbolic, they were theatrical. Sacrifice was a public event, and the audience expected drama. The feathers had to flutter, the gold had to gleam, the loincloth had to stay in place, ideally. It was a spiritual performance, and you were the star. Unfortunately, your final act involved a lot of screaming and very little applause. As you settle into bed tonight, be grateful your pajamas aren't made of jaguar fur or ceremonial skin. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be feathered, not flayed. Before the blade, before the blood, before the gods got their snack, there were stairs. Lots of them. The Aztec temples weren't built for convenience. They were built for grandeur, intimidation, and calf definition. Victims didn't just stroll into the afterlife. They huffed puffed, and ascended like doomed mountaineers on a spiritual treadmill. The great temple of Tenochtitlan had over 100 steps, steep and narrow, designed to elevate the soul and exhaust the body. Priests would lead the procession, chanting, drumming, and occasionally throwing flower petals, which sounds lovely until you realize you're barefoot. Painted blue and about to be introduced to a very sharp obsidian knife. The climb was symbolic. Each step brought you closer to the heavens, to the gods, and to your own demise. It was a vertical pilgrimage, a final act of devotion, and a test of balance. Slipping was frowned upon. So was hesitation. If you paused too long, a priest might give you a helpful nudge. Spiritually, of course. Spectators gathered below, watching the ascent like a grim parade. Children, elders, warriors, all eyes on the chosen one. It was part spectacle, part sermon. The message was clear. Devotion requires effort, elevation, and a strong core. By the time you reached the top, you were breathless, terrified, and probably regretting skipping breakfast. But you were also radiant, painted, adorned, and spiritually primed. The gods didn't want a sluggish offering. They wanted drama. They wanted sweat. They wanted someone who could climb 100 steps and still look vaguely majestic. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, be grateful your journey to bed involves no stairs, no chanting priests, and no ceremonial nudges. You've already ascended enough. Sleep well, stairless soul. At the summit of the temple, with the crowd below and the gods presumably watching from above, the real show began. The Aztecs didn't believe in half measures. If you were going to sacrifice someone, you did it with flair, precision, and a ceremonial knife so sharp it could slice through a mango midair, or, more commonly, a rib cage. Obsidian was the blade of choice. Volcanic glass, jet black and deadly, it was sharper than steel and more poetic than practical. Priests wielded it with the confidence of seasoned chefs, except instead of, they were extracting still beating hearts. The goal, offer the heart to the gods while it was fresh, warm, and, preferably, still twitching. Divine freshness mattered. The victim was laid on a stone slab, arms and legs held down by assistants who were either very strong or very enthusiastic. The priest would chant, raise the blade, and, in one swift, practiced motion, open the chest like a macabre gift box. The heart was lifted skyward, offered to the sun, and sometimes placed in a ceremonial bowl. Occasionally, it was burned. Occasionally, it was eaten. Occasionally, it was just admired. This wasn't just gore for gore's sake. It was theology in action. The Aztecs believed the heart contained the essence of life. the sacred energy that kept the cosmos spinning. By giving it to the gods, they were feeding the universe, ensuring the sun would rise, the rain would fall, and the crops wouldn't throw a tantrum. And yes, it was messy. Blood flowed down the temple steps like divine gravy. But to the Aztecs, it was beautiful, a crimson affirmation of cosmic order. The victim, now heartless but spiritually fulfilled, was sometimes tossed down the stairs, a final descent to match the earlier climb. Gravity meet theology. So, tonight, as your own heart beats gently in your chest, be grateful it's staying put. No obsidian, no chanting, no ceremonial bowls. Just you, your pulse, and the comforting knowledge that your bedtime story didn't end in a sacrificial flourish. You'd think that after a dramatic heart removal and a body tumbling down temple stairs, the mood would be somber, reflective, maybe a bit awkward. But no. The Aztecs knew how to throw a post-sacrifice bash. If the gods were fed, the people deserved a little fun. And by fun, we mean dancing, feasting, and occasionally repurposing body parts into home. The festivities began almost immediately. Priests would clean the altar, a generous term. It mostly involved sweeping blood off stone, and musicians would strike up tunes with drums, flutes, and rattles. Dancers in elaborate costumes twirled and stomped, reenacting myths, honoring gods, and occasionally impersonating jaguars. It was spiritual, theatrical, and surprisingly rhythmic. Food was served: maize tamales, chili sauces, and pulque, a mildly alcoholic drink made from fermented agave. It was a communal celebration, a moment of cosmic gratitude. The sacrifice wasn't just a grim necessity. It was a divine transaction, and the receipt came in the form of roasted corn and interpretive dance. And then there were the bones. The Aztecs didn't waste much. Skulls were cleaned, polished, and sometimes added to zompantli, skull racks that lined temple courtyards like eerie trophies. Femurs could be carved into flutes. Rib bones might become ceremonial tools. It was recycling with a spiritual twist. Nothing says devotion like playing a tune on your cousin's tibia. The mood was reverent but lively. Children played. Elders told stories. Priests gave thanks. It was a reminder that death in Aztec culture wasn't the end. It was a renewal, a cosmic reboot, and a reason to party. The gods were pleased. The sun would rise, and the crops would hopefully behave. So tonight, as you drift off, imagine a world where sacrifice led to salsa dancing and bone flutes. Strange. Yes, but oddly comforting, because even in the darkest rituals, the Aztecs found rhythm, community, and a reason to celebrate. Not every Aztec sacrifice involved a screaming captive dragged up temple stairs. Some people, believe it or not, volunteered. Yes, in a twist that would baffle modern HR departments, certain individuals raised their hands and said, "I'd like to be ritually disemboweled for the greater cosmic good." These weren't just impulsive thrill seekers. They were often priests, warriors, or chosen impersonators of gods. People who believed that dying in a specific ceremonial way would grant them divine favor, eternal glory, or a VIP pass to the afterlife. It was spiritual ambition meets theatrical martyrdom. The most famous example: the impersonator of Tenochtitlan, the god of fate and sorcery. This lucky soul was selected for his beauty, grace, and flute-playing skills. For a full year, he lived like royalty, pampered, adored, dressed in finery, and taught to walk with divine swagger. He was the living embodiment of the god. And then, on the appointed day, he was sacrificed in a grand ceremony. No surprises. He knew the script. He'd rehearsed the ending. Some warriors volunteered to be sacrificed after battle, believing it was the most honorable exit. Others offered themselves during festivals, hoping to ensure rain, fertility, or a good harvest. It wasn't seen as tragic. It was transcendent, a cosmic promotion, a spiritual mic drop. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. There were moments of hesitation, last-minute regrets, and the occasional wait. I thought this was metaphorical. But once the ceremony began, there was no turning back. The gods didn't do refunds. So tonight, as you lie comfortably in bed, be grateful your ambitions don't require ceremonial death. You can chase glory without obsidian. You can seek meaning without flutes and feathers. And you can volunteer for things like bake sales and book clubs, not bloodletting. If you thought being an Aztec priest meant quiet meditation and gentle incense wafting through the temple, think again. These were not your average robe-wearing philosophers. Sacrificial priests were part theologian, part executioner, and part stage manager for the bloodiest show in town. Their job: keep the gods fed, the rituals precise, and the audience spiritually satisfied. That meant memorizing chants, mastering ceremonial timing, and, most importantly, wielding obsidian knives with surgical flair. A good priest could open a chest in seconds. A great priest could do it with style. Training began early. Young boys destined for priesthood were taught sacred songs, ritual dances, and anatomy. Not the label, the skeleton kind, but the how to extract a heart without losing your rhythm kind. They practiced on animals, then moved on to humans. It was a calling, not a hobby, and it came with serious pressure. One slip, one botched sacrifice, and you risked offending the gods and embarrassing yourself in front of a very judgmental crowd. Priests were also responsible for preparing the victims, painting them, dressing them, calming them, or not. and guiding them up the temple steps. They had to maintain composure even when things got messy. And things always got messy. Blood, sweat, feathers, and the occasional awkward eye contact. It was all part of the gig. But it wasn't just gore. Priests were deeply spiritual. They believed they were maintaining cosmic balance, ensuring the sun would rise and the universe wouldn't collapse in a divine tantrum. Their rituals were precise, poetic, and profoundly meaningful, even if they involved a lot of screaming. And yes, they had a look. Shaved heads, black robes, and fingers stained with ceremonial ash and, well, other things. They were respected, feared, and occasionally avoided at dinner parties. So tonight, as you drift off, be thankful your job doesn't involve heart removal or divine choreography. You can honor the cosmos with a yawn and a blanket. No obsidian required. If you were an average Aztec citizen, chances are you didn't climb the temple steps or wield the obsidian blade. But you did watch, and watching was no passive affair. Sacrifices were public, theatrical, and deeply communal. Part religious rite, part civic entertainment, and part bring the kids. It's educational. Crowds gathered early. The plaza below the temple would fill with families, merchants, warriors, and priests in training. There were vendors selling food, maize cakes, roasted insects, pulque in clay cups, and musicians warming up with flutes and drums. It was a festival atmosphere, minus the balloon animals, and plus a lot of blood. Spectators didn't just observe, they participated. They chanted, danced, and threw flower petals. They gasped at the dramatic moments, cheered the precision of the priest's blade, and sometimes wept with reverence. It was spiritual catharsis meets live-action myth reenactment. Think Broadway, but with more entrails. Children were brought to watch, not out of cruelty, but out of cosmic education. Sacrifice was a lesson in devotion, duty, and the delicate balance of the universe. Plus, it gave them something to talk about at school. My uncle was sacrificed last week. Front row seats, the mood varied. Some ceremonies were solemn, others celebratory. A sacrifice to the rain god might be hopeful and festive. One to the war god, fierce and fiery. But always the crowd was engaged. This wasn't morbid voyeurism. It was communal spirituality. The gods were watching, and so were the neighbors. And yes, there were snacks. Because even cosmic rituals are better with something crunchy. So tonight, as you curl up in your quiet room, be grateful your spiritual experiences don't involve crowds, chanting, or ceremonial popcorn. You can honor the mysteries of existence with a soft pillow and a private yawn. If the Aztecs had a motto for their temple design, it might have been, "Go big, go steep, go sacred. These weren't cozy chapels or modest shrines. Aztec temples were colossal stone pyramids engineered to impress the gods, intimidate the neighbors, and give every sacrificial victim a final cardio challenge. The most famous was the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, a twin temple structure dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of war, and Talat, god of rain. Rising over 60 meters, it loomed over the city like a divine skyscraper, its steps steep enough to make even the most devout pause for breath. And yes, those steps doubled as a blood slide during particularly enthusiastic ceremonies. Temples were built layer by layer, often expanded over generations. Each new ruler added height, flair, and occasionally a fresh coat of symbolic paint. Blue for rain, red for war, and sometimes skull motifs for that extra "don't mess with us" vibe. The architecture wasn't just functional, it was theological storytelling in stone. Inside, the temples housed altars, idols, and offerings, from jade figurines to roasted frogs. Outside, the courtyards featured skull racks, ceremonial platforms, and enough incense to make the entire plaza smell like divine barbecue. The layout was designed to guide the eye upward, toward the heavens, and toward the moment when a priest would raise a freshly liberated heart skyward. But temples weren't just for sacrifice. They were centers of learning, prophecy, and ritual. Priests studied astronomy, interpreted omens, and occasionally hosted festivals that involved dancing, singing, and very elaborate featherwork. The temple was the heartbeat of the city, both literally and metaphorically. And yes, they were beautiful. Terrifying, yes, but beautiful. Carvings of serpents, eagles, and gods adorned the walls. Gold and turquoise gleamed in the sun. The whole structure was a cosmic stage, built to honor the divine and remind everyone who was in charge. Spoiler, it wasn't the guy selling tamales. So tonight, as you lie in your modest, stare-free home, be grateful your spiritual journey doesn't involve climbing a pyramid or dodging ceremonial blood puddles. You can admire the stars without ascending a stone monolith. If you thought Aztec sacrifices were random acts of divine enthusiasm, think again. These rituals were meticulously timed, woven into a calendar so complex it made modern planners look like doodle pads. The Aztecs didn't just sacrifice, they scheduled it with celestial flair and seasonal precision. Their calendar system was dew-layered. The tonal pahuli, tonal 60-day sacred cycle used for divination and ritual timing, and the shupawali, a 365-day solar calendar that tracked agricultural seasons and civic festivals. Together, they created a cosmic rhythm, a divine drumbeat that told priests when to chant, when to dance, and when to sharpen the obsidian. Each month, there were 18 in the solar calendar, had its own festival complete with specific gods, rituals, and yes, sacrifices. Some months honored rain gods with watery offerings and frog-themed dances. Others celebrated war gods with heart removals and warrior impersonations. It was like a spiritual subscription box. New theme, new victim, same cosmic purpose. The timing wasn't arbitrary. Sacrifices aligned with solstices, equinoxes, harvests, and celestial events. If Venus was in a certain position, it might be time to offer a warrior. If the maize was ripening, perhaps a child would be symbolically returned to the earth. It was theology meets astronomy meets very intense scheduling. Priests acted as cosmic timekeepers, consulting codices, observing the stars, and occasionally panicking when a ritual was overdue. The stakes were high. A missed sacrifice could anger the gods, disrupt the seasons, or cause a celestial tantrum. So yes, they took punctuality very seriously, and the festivals. They were grand. Music, costumes, feasting, and communal rituals filled the plazas. It wasn't just about death. It was about renewal, gratitude, and cosmic harmony. The calendar kept the universe spinning, and the sacrifices kept it fed. So tonight, as you drift off with no appointments, deadlines, or divine obligations, be grateful your calendar doesn't include offer heart to sun god under Tuesday's to-do list. You can honor time with a nap and a dream. No obsidian required. To the Aztecs, blood wasn't just a bodily fluid. It was cosmic nectar, the essence of life. The divine espresso shot that kept the universe awake and functioning. Sacrifice wasn't about cruelty. It was about generosity, a sacred transaction, a spiritual Venmo payment to the gods, with hearts as the tip. They believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world. The sun god, for example, had thrown himself into a fire to become the blazing orb in the sky. That kind of commitment demanded repayment. And what better way to say thank you than with a fresh, warm heart? The heart was considered the seat of the soul, the ultimate offering. Blood, meanwhile, was the fuel. It nourished the gods, kept the seasons turning, and ensured the sun didn't hit snooze. Every drop spilled on the temple steps was a renewal, a reminder that life required sacrifice, and that sacrifice required drama. Even small rituals involved blood. Priests would pierce their ears, tongues, or genitals. Yes, really. To offer drops during ceremonies. It wasn't just about killing. It was about giving. Pain was devotion. Bleeding was prayer. And the gods were always thirsty. This belief extended to agriculture, war, and even childbirth. Blood was life, and life was sacred. A warrior who died in battle was considered a living sacrifice. A woman who died in childbirth was honored like a fallen soldier. The Aztecs saw the world as a cycle of giving and receiving, and blood was the currency. So tonight, as your own heart beats quietly and your blood stays politely inside your veins, be grateful you live in a world where devotion doesn't require dramatic leakage. You can honor existence with a sigh, a snuggle, and a very non-sacrificial bedtime. You might think mass human sacrifice would be bad for business, but in the Aztec world, it was practically a growth strategy. Sacrifice wasn't just religious, it was economic, political, and logistical. A well-oiled system where blood kept the gods happy and the empire running. First, let's talk warfare. The Aztecs didn't just fight to kill, they fought to capture. Their elite warriors trained not to slay enemies, but to snatch them alive for a future sacrifice. These flower wars were like ritualized combat tournaments, designed to harvest humans like particularly aggressive crops. The more captives you brought home, the more prestige you earned. It was linked in for warriors, but with more obsidian. Then there was infrastructure. Sacrificial ceremonies were massive public events. Think Super Bowl meets Game of Thrones. They required temples, priests, musicians, dancers, costumes, food, and logistics. Entire industries revolved around these rituals. Artisans made ceremonial knives. Farmers grew food for feasts. Tailors stitched divine outfits. The gods got hearts, and the people got jobs. Even politics got a boost. Sacrifice was a flex. It showed power, dominance, and divine favor. When the emperor hosted a big ritual, Wazanti, just for the gods, it was a message to rivals. We have the captives, the priests, and the pyramids. Bow down. It was PR with a splash of arterial spray. And let's not forget social cohesion. Sacrifice created a shared mythology. Everyone from nobles to commoners played a role. Some gave blood, some gave food, some gave applause. It was a communal act of devotion, terror, and identity. The empire was built not just on stone, but on ritual. So yes, it was gruesome, but it was also functional. The Aztecs turned sacrifice into a sacred supply chain, where hearts fueled crods, gods fueled crops, and crops fueled civilization. Now sleep soundly, knowing your local economy runs on spreadsheets, not spleens. If Zelo had existed in Tenochtitlan, the Temple of Skulls would have been listed as open-air structure with excellent ventilation, panoramic views, and approximately 60,000 decorative craniums, ideal for terrifying neighbors. This was the Tsampantali, a massive skull rack built to display the heads of sacrificial victims. Think of it as a billboard for divine power. Rows upon rows of skulls were mounted on horizontal poles, stacked like macabre trophies. It wasn't hidden, a weight was front and center. right near the main temple, a statement piece, a conversation starter, a deterrent to rebellion. But it wasn't just for shock value. Then Pentley was deeply symbolic. Each skull was a reminder of devotion, of cosmic balance, of the price paid to keep the sun rising. It was also a kind of LaGroix public record of offerings. The gods didn't accept wire transfers. They wanted bone receipts. Visitors to the city traders, diplomats, rival rulers would see it and think, these people do not mess around. It was psychological warfare in architectural form, a monument to faith, fear, and civic pride. And yes, it smelled. But the Aztecs had incense, flowers, and a high tolerance for the pungent. To them, the Desempantli wasn't grotesque, was glorious, a sacred sculpture carved from devotion and mortality. So tonight, as you admire your minimalist and skull-free walls, remember, some civilizations preferred bold statements, and nothing says we're serious about religion like a temple made of heads. If you imagined Aztec priests as quiet monks humming chants in candlelit corners, think again. These were high-octane holy men. Their job: keep the gods fed, the rituals flawless, and the audience gasping. They were a part theologian, part executioner, part celebrity. First, the look. Priests wore long black robes, often stiff with dried blood. Their hair was matted and uncut, symbolizing devotion. Their skin was smeared with ash and incense. Some even filed their teeth into points. If you saw one walking toward you, you'd know two things. He's deeply spiritual. You should probably run. Then came the training. Priests didn't just wake up one day and start slicing hearts. They studied for years. Astronomy, mythology, ritual, choreography. They learned how to read omens, chant prayers, and wield obsidian blades with surgical precision. A botched sacrifice wasn't just embarrassing, it was cosmically dangerous. You didn't want to offend the sun god with clumsy wristwork. They also performed daily rituals. Not every ceremony involved a full-body donation. Many priests pierced their own skin, tongues, ears, even genitals, to offer drops of blood. It was a constant reminder that devotion required pain, and that pain was sacred. But here's the twist. Priests weren't just feared, they were respected. They were the bridge between mortals and gods. They carried the weight of the cosmos on their shoulders. And they had surprisingly good skincare, thanks to ritual steam baths, herbal salves, and a lifestyle that involved a lot of incense. So tonight, as you drift off in your comfy bed, spare a thought for the priest who spent his day chanting, bleeding, and performing open-heart ceremonies on a pyramid. He wasn't just doing a job. He was keeping the universe alive. Forget pumpkin spice and fireworks. The Aztec calendar was packed with festivals that made modern holidays look like polite brunches. with 18 months, each lasting 20 days, plus a 5-day oops period of cosmic instability. The Aztecs had a year-round schedule of themed rituals, and many of them involved sacrifice. Lots of it. Each month honored a different deity, and each deity had preferences. Some liked flowers, others liked music, and some, well, preferred freshly harvested humans. It was like a divine dinner party, and the priests were the caterers. Let's sample a few festive favorites. Tlaxcapealesli, roughly March, dedicated to Zyptotec, the flayed god. Victims were sacrificed and then skinned. Priests wore the flayed skins like fashion statements, a cuckoo, but make it horrifying. Toes Stonely, April-ish, a quieter month, but still involved child sacrifices to honor agricultural fertility. The logic, innocence feeds the earth. The vibe. Grim, spring cleaning, Coxcatel, May. A young man was chosen to impersonate the god Tezcatlipoca for a year. He lived like royalty, played the flute, and then, surprise, was sacrificed in a grand ceremony. It was the ultimate internship with a tragic severance package. Panquitsalistli, December, honoring Huitzilopochtli, the war god. This was peak sacrifice season. Captives were lined up, hearts were offered, and the city pulsed with devotion and adrenaline. Think of it as the Aztec version of Black Friday, but with more blood and fewer discounts. These festivals weren't just about appeasing gods. They were about community, identity, and cosmic balance. Everyone participated. Some danced, some sang, some donated organs. It was a sacred rhythm, a calendar of connection between heaven and earth. So tonight, as you mark your own calendar with dentist appointments and dinner plans, remember, the Aztecs scheduled their lives around sacrifice. And somehow, they still found time for music, flowers, and really intense costumes. You might imagine Aztec victims as terrified captives dragged up temple steps. And yes, that happened. But the reality was more nuanced and occasionally downright bizarre. Some victims were prisoners of war, others were slaves. A few were volunteers. And one lucky guy got to live like a god for a year before being ceremonially unalived. Let's break it down. Captives of war. Aztec warfare wasn't just about conquest. It was about harvesting humans, warriors trained to capture, not kill. The more captives you brought back, the more prestige you earned. These prisoners were often sacrificed during festivals, their deaths seen as noble offerings to the gods. It was brutal, but deeply ritualized. Slaves and criminals, some sacrifices came from within Aztec society. Slaves could be offered by their owners as acts of devotion. Criminals might be sentenced to death via ritual. It wasn't just punishment, it was purification, a way to restore cosmic balance. The divine impersonator in the festival of Tenochtitlan, a young man was chosen to impersonate the god Tenochtitlan. For a year, he lived in luxury, adored by the public, dressed in divine regalia. He played the flute, walked the city, and was treated like royalty. Then, on the appointed day, he was sacrificed, willingly, with dignity. To die as a god was the highest honor. Voluntary sacrifice, yes, some people volunteered. Especially in times of crisis, drought, famine, celestial weirdness, individuals might offer themselves to the gods. It was seen as the ultimate act of devotion, a cosmic gift, a spiritual fast track to paradise. And what happened after death? The Aztecs believed in multiple afterlives. Warriors and sacrificial victims often went to the sun's domain, joining the god Huitzilopochtli in eternal glory. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in with all organs intact, remember, in the Aztec world, sacrifice wasn't just loss. It was meaning, honor, and sometimes a very dramatic career path. By the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire was a glittering powerhouse. Pyramids piercing the sky, markets bustling, priests sharpening obsidian blades. But across the ocean, a storm was brewing. Enter a man with armor, ambition, and absolutely no chill. When the Spanish landed in 1519, they were horrified by Aztec rituals, human sacrifice, skull racks, heart removal as public spectacle. To the conquistadors, this wasn't religion, it was heresy, and they came armed with guns, horses, and Catholic guilt. But it wasn't just firepower that toppled the empire. It was strategy. Allied with rival tribes who hated the Aztecs and their habit of turning neighbors into temple. With their help, he marched on Tenochtitlan, the heart of the empire. The Aztecs fought fiercely. Their warriors were brave, their city magnificent. But they were up against steel swords, cannons, and smallpox, a disease that decimated the population before many battles even began. By 1521, the city fell. The temples were looted, the idols smashed, the Tenochtitlan dismantled. Spanish priests replaced Aztec ones, preaching salvation through Christ, not sacrifice. The pyramids were repurposed, the rituals banned, the gods silenced. The Aztecs believed their rituals kept the universe alive. Without them, would the sun still rise? Would the rains still fall? The Spanish said yes. The Aztecs weren't so sure, and yet echoes remain. In Mexico City, beneath modern streets, lie the ruins of Tenochtitlan. Archaeologists have uncovered skull racks, ceremonial knives, and temple stones. The past whispers through the dust, reminding us that belief can build empires and tear them down. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the quiet after the conquest, the pyramids watching the stars, the gods waiting in silence, And the question lingering in the air: what happens when the sacrifices stop? The Aztec Empire may have crumbled under Spanish boots, but its spirit never vanished. It slipped into the soil, the language, the art. It whispered through generations, reshaping itself into legend, into culture, into bedtime stories told in Nahuatl and Spanish alike. Today, you'll find Aztec symbols on murals, coins, and tattoos. You'll hear their gods in poetry, their myths in music. Their calendar still fascinates. Their temples still rise from beneath the streets of Mexico City, stubborn and sacred. And their sacrifices, they've become metaphors. We no longer offer hearts to the sun, but we still give pieces of ourselves to love, to art, to purpose. We still believe in devotion, in ritual, in the idea that some things are worth giving up comfort for. The Aztecs remind us that belief can be beautiful, terrifying, and transformative. That stories shape reality. That even the darkest rituals can be rooted in light. In the hope that the sun will rise, the rain will fall, and life will go on. So as you close your eyes tonight, imagine the pyramids bathed in moonlight, the drums silent, the stars watching, and somewhere deep in the cosmic rhythm, a heartbeat still echoing, not of fear, but of memory. The empire may be gone, but the story, it's still alive. Sleep well, dream deep, and remember, history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to keep.